Welcome to this first of two presentations about the mysteries and mythology of Christmas, the way that we celebrate Christmas, the history, heritage and traditions which go into that. I'm going to share with you the first of two presentations. On the wild side of Christmas. So, Merry Christmas to you all. This is a typical image of a Victorian Christmas, a family heading back home, carrying fuel for the fire through the deep snow. But when we look at Christmas, when we look at Christmas celebrations and things that are deeply embedded in our society today, we need to think about aspects of history, heritage, religion, myth, paganism, and Christianity. There's a huge amount of archaeology and there are artifacts and heritage still to be discovered in the Middle East, but particularly in the towns such as Bethlehem, where Christ was born around 2,000 years ago. But it's worth bearing in mind that there were other religions also vying for domination at the time. You're in a society where you had multiple gods, multiple religions, and one of the main rivals for early Christianity was Mithraism, a Roman mystery religion centered on the god Mithras. And in many ways, it was only by a wing and a prayer that we have become Christians and not Mithraists. An interesting thought, perhaps. But when we're looking at Christianity and Christmas, we think about custom and tradition, things that are deeply embedded in our society and our behavior today. And various images. I'm not convinced by the benevolence of the Father Christmas character on the left there with his little birch switch. Let's hope the child has been good this year. And the guy on the right looks decidedly dodgy. He's bearing great gifts for the child, but even leaving aside the beard, he's got a very strange expression on his face. St. Nicholas, oh yeah, well, I'm not convinced. And of course, the whole celebration at Christmas time is not necessarily to do with religious belief, but it's very much to do with feasting, overeating, drinking, making merry. So there's this mixture between the deep religious, contemplative feelings and also simply having a damn good time. And of course, what you do and what you have and where you are depends on your background, on your location. If you go to Eastern Europe, such as say Ukraine or Poland, then you might be carrying back to the Christmas table a Christmas carp rather than a Christmas turkey. And it's worth thinking about where these celebrations come from. The Roman festival of Saturnia was an ancient pagan holiday which honoured the Roman god Saturn. From about the 17th to the 24th of December, a week of eating, drinking and giving presents during the Northern Hemisphere's winter solstice. But bear in mind that when we talk about the dates, the calendar has changed dramatically over the last 2,000 years, and it has been the focus of very, very heated debates within the Christian Church, for example, during the so-called Dark Ages and into the Middle Ages. So the dates that we may see quoted may not be exactly the same dates in the calendar as they're equivalent today. The Celts celebrated the arrival of the winter solstice, nights getting lighter at last and spring on its way. This is hugely important in the psyche of the people, because those dark, long nights getting ever longer, ever darker, in the Northern Hemisphere, this can be absolutely miserable. And bearing in mind, you're in a society where there's no external lighting and there's very little internal lighting, then the loss of the sun is a huge threat to your existence. I've been talking to friends recently about how the very dark afternoons and nights in late November and early December this year make people feel really very, very miserable and very depressed and despondent. And actually losing sunlight can cause psychological impacts through light deprivation. So there are all sorts of issues here, and that meant that the turning point, the winter solstice, became increasingly important. The early Christian church, however, tried to ban the earlier pagan customs, encouraging its converts to follow Christ. But wintertime celebrations, for all the reasons I've just mentioned, were deeply embedded. Winter was a dark, depressing time, and people were keen to hold winter solstice festivals. And it was a marker that things were on the turn, things were changing. So unable to ban all festivities, the church did a clever maneuver, providing an alternative with a festival honouring the birth of Jesus Christ, and ultimately the pagan originating Christmas traditions that we have and celebrate today. And these include, of course, things like the Christmas turkey. And it is interesting, of course, because the turkey is not a native British bird. It's the North American one. I always like the story that whilst the symbol of the USA is, of course, the bald eagle, it was very, very close to becoming the turkey. I mean, with Donald Trump, that would have been really quite appropriate. So I think that's a really nice touch that the Senate nearly made the turkey the national bird of the USA. But it's not our bird. It's not our Christmas bird, really. The English turkey was the great bustard, which becomes extinct in the 1700s and 1800s because of the parliamentary enclosures and the turning of open common land into the modern farming landscape we see today. So the turkey was kind of the new kid on the block, and in actual fact, the traditional fare at Christmas, if you were wealthy, would have probably been a goose, and at a higher level, such as a king or queen, then perhaps a swan, with the odd common crane, bittern, and heron, perhaps, or egret, all thrown into the mix. So here we have our typical image of a Christmas scene with the lady with her arm around a goose, the typical Christmas goose. We have got the American turkey there. Obviously very big in the States for Thanksgiving rather than necessarily for Christmas, because they wanted when the Americans claimed independence from Britain, they wanted a separate and distinctive ceremony and festival. So they have the Thanksgiving and traditional turkey for that. But it became adopted as the Christmas bird over here, probably more so than the goose. But there you've got some of the other aspects of the Christmas image, the crackers, the Christmas pudding, the holly and the red berries, the mistletoe and the white berries. So we're actually now incorporating a whole mix of different imagery into the Christmas package. The pagan origins of holly and the holly as decoration. You know, this again is an important part of our Christmas celebrations, that people go out and gather holly and decorate their homes with it. But for Romans, holly was the sacred plant of the god Saturn, and so at the annual Saturnalia festival, they presented gifts of holly wreaths. Christians celebrating the birth of Jesus risked persecution for their beliefs, and to avoid detection, they decorated their homes with holly wreaths. The red berries, symbolic of the blood of Christ, and they would put these around and in their homes. Passers-by would assume Saturnalia, not Christmas. In Germany, a holly sprig in church decorations was thought to protect homes from lightning. English farmers even decorated beehives with holly, as it was thought that at the first Christmas, the birth of Christ, bees hummed in honour of the infant Jesus. And so we start to acquire a whole set of different images and imagery. The benevolent Santa Claus, Sinterklaas, with red again, but his head wreathed in holly and with the red berries, very, very symbolic of the crown of thorns and the specks of blood on Christ's brow on the cross. And here in Northern European culture, fairies are hugely important, something that are found in the depths of the forest, or if you go to Ireland with fairies and the little people. But we also have the robin, again, the redbreast, symbolic of Christ's blood, but then mixed with a strongly pagan symbol of mistletoe and the white berries. And winter was also very much a time of snow, of probably change in social behaviour, because it's a time when perhaps there are fewer jobs to do in the countryside, the snow is on the ground. So what do? You can go and play. And of course, lots of snow, so all the traditions of snowballing and snowball fights, etc. For a child growing up today, this will be something almost equally mythologically. It's something that they don't experience. So that's a change really in the last 50 or 60 years, perhaps. We seem to get far less snow. There are exceptions. 10 years ago, we had a terrific snowfall in the winter, 2010 and 2011. But if we look at Victorian imagery of wintertime, it's often to do with people carrying faggots of wood to keep the house warm. And we have to put ourselves back into that landscape, if you like, of cottages without, in some cases, without windows, certainly no double glazing, no central heating, of desperate cold and fuel poverty. So it's a struggle to keep warm. It's hugely important. You see the peasant trudging back, carrying a faggot of fuel wood over his shoulder, going through the deep snow. And they're harvesting faggots from the coppice wood to take to maybe the local manor, or to sell to local householders. And the tradition of feeding the birds, which when it began in the Victorian period was viewed as highly eccentric, because the Victorians were obsessed, for good reasons, with the home economy and everything was used. So the idea of actually giving food away to the wild creatures was really a sort of anathema to the Victorian spirit. But this emerged during the Victorian period, and we have the writing of people like W.H. Hudson and others telling us about the London tradition now of feeding the birds. So again, trudging back through the wet depths of winter, deep snow, to a cottage where hopefully there's a cozy fire awaiting. And all sorts of other games that you might play. This is a very upmarket household, but there's all sorts of traditional games that were played, and festive activities, many with strongly pagan elements to them, and decorating the churches, the homes and the churches with greenery. We've got holly and mistletoe and other greenery. And yet these are hugely pagan symbols. These are not Christian symbols. And the games that are played with things like mistletoe hanging from a ceiling, we'll come and have a look at that in a short while. But there you've got a typical scene, perhaps in an inn or a tavern, with birds hanging, a fire in a huge fireplace, greenery, and people celebrating. Or toasting in front of a blazing fire. whilst preparing the greenery and hanging the wreath, etc. And we have things like wassailing, an ancient tradition not seen very often today, but it comes from the Anglo-Saxon phrase wassail, good health. And we have all sorts of things linked to either Christmas, but also to New Year. Things like first footings and carrying a piece of coal to your neighbour's house and taking good luck. A lot of these images are to do with good luck. And then, of course, we have the whole thing about the Yule log collected and taken in to the household. Now, Yule logs are from a time when European pagans had fires during the winter solstice, and they symbolize the return of the sun as the days began to get longer, life persisting through the darkness. So you're in this landscape where you're very much more affected by the seasons than we are today. And as it got dark, it got bitterly dark. It was bitterly cold. There were long winters. There were long nights. And the log and its burning symbolized the maintenance of light, the maintenance of life through the dark period and into the spring to come. So it became hugely important. They were very important festivities. A piece of last year's log was saved to start this year's fire. It was unlucky to buy a log, but it should be harvested from land or received as a gift, and they would be dragged home with great ceremony to be placed in the house, in the fireplace, decorated with greenery, smothered with alcohol, so it's going to get a good blaze going, and dusted with flour. It was then set alight to burn all night, but because it was a big log and not pre-dried, so you've got a log which is probably slightly, I mean, whether it was a green log or whether it's simply damp, who knows, but it would burn at first, and then the idea was it would smoulder for 12 days, so the 12 days of Christmas. And in this landscape, people were hugely influenced by omens and the sky. The night sky would be dramatic. You only have to step outside today if you can get somewhere where you haven't got the all-embracing light pollution that we experience. You suddenly see the sky light up and the stars become absolutely amazing. So something like a comet would be viewed as hugely symbolic for those ancient people. So the Christmas star, which led the wise men long ago, may it guide you as then it guided them to joy on earth and peace to all men. These things became very, very important in being omens, in something that you could interpret, that the wise men, the shamans, could look at the sky and tell you of things to come or things that have passed. So what we see is a whole range of things that are now acquired as part of our Christian story. And I do think it's quite interesting when you look at some of the, for example, Victorian and Edwardian Christmas cards that were sent with species that are really absolutely nothing at all to do with Christmas. Herb Robert there, one of the little geranium family. It's a summertime flower. Small copper butterflies and a clump of meadow grass. May New Year joys hover round thee. Well, you're not going to get those in the depths of winter. I'm sorry about that. And maybe the water lily. The lily is often taken as a symbol of peace and sanctity. So maybe that's the link there. But again, it's a summertime flower. And you get a whole mix of New World and Old World, holly and red berries, and an American robin. But again, because of climate change and warmer winters, we are getting some of the swallow family hanging around late in the season, but really you're unlikely to get a house martin flying over with the compliments of the season. That is just completely out of kilter. Celebrating with evergreen leaves and red berries very important. The traditional Christmas colours of red and green are complementary and represent fertility during the darkness of winter. You're trying to harness and hold on to the life from the year past and carry it through the depths of winter in the year to come and the spring to come. We're hoping in a subsistence economy that the spring will be fertile, the summer will be fertile, that food will be on the table again. So pagan-derived decorations at Christmas include green leaves and red berries of holly, of green mistletoe, green laurel, and wreaths. But the imagery is taken by the Christian church with the red berries, for example, symbolizing the blood of Christ on the cross. So that we have all these mixes of different species, a blue jay there with American holly and red berries. And these kind of get infused into the images that we see on Christmas cards and other things associated with the Christmas period. And they morph into the New Year greetings as well. So again, a swallow there with a New Year omen of mistletoe, various flowers, and a courting couple. And then also we have, I've put this one in, this is Easter greetings. So you get a whole bundle of imagery which comes out at Easter. Again, how some of this links to Christian faith is quite a tricky one. Things like the Easter bunnies and the hares and the eggs are really all to do with Celtic fertility symbols and nothing to do at all with Easter. But it's again the church mixing existing events and ceremonies into their own to get people into the swing of the Christmas and then Easter. And these Easter lilies with the girls' heads in the middle of the flower, I do find slightly disturbing. I'm not quite sure what the artist is expecting us to take home from that. And again, their Happy New Year with a swallow. Well, maybe again, the swallow's breast and the red berries linked to Christ, and the swallow perhaps is there as a symbol when it arrives of the new year, the new spring that's on its way. So I can see there the swallow perhaps having some real message. The robin is interesting because it's one of the birds which does sing in the winter. It holds territory throughout the winter months, and therefore it defends that territory. The breast is symbolic, like the berries, of the blood of Christ. So that's the Christmas connection. But the other thing is that robins are basically forest birds that follow large grazing herbivores through the forest and feed on areas that they've disturbed. So insects or maybe other potential food that's been disturbed by a wild boar or a red deer, perhaps. So in the garden, they follow us in just the same way. They're looking for us to disturb the vegetation, to disturb the soil, and to open up possible feeding. So therefore, they are inquisitive, they're approachable, they will follow us around. So they become very, very important to people in the depths of winter. The robin is a bird that will come to us for shelter, that will come to us for food. And of course, the Father Christmas, the Santa Claus legend. And this appears to be very closely linked to the magic mushrooms, the phlegaric fungus. Again, a very mixed set of messages there, because the birds and the mammals are all North American ones, even though supposedly Father Christmas originates in Lapland. I'm not quite sure where he would have got that particular range of species into his entourage. And Father Christmas, the whole thing is linked to the reindeer, and the reindeer were the traditional beast that drew the sleighs in northern Scandinavia. But one of the big issues here is the role of the magic mushroom, which is very, very important. Now, the phlegaric can stay present. It's quite hardy, and you can get it even when there's quite heavy snow. And it is one of the agaric family of mushrooms, which is very hallucinogenic. It is slightly dodgy because the amounts of the hallucinogenic chemicals vary within the flesh of the mushroom, whether it's in the stem, the cap, or in the skin covering the cap, and whether it's fresh or dry. So the impact can be quite radically different. But what the magic mushroom appears to do is to exaggerate your behavior. So this is the thing that the Vikings took before going into battle to make them fearless. And instead of running up, maybe walking upstairs or steps, you would leap upstairs, you'd leap downstairs, you'd leap, they have no fear. There's a similar species that the Zulu warriors took before going into battle, and they were famously fearless. So we have the hallucinogenic mushroom. One of the interesting things is that apparently the reindeer also took the mushroom, they would eat it. And I just wonder who actually thought this is a good idea and discovered it. But the hallucinogenic chemical is passed through in reindeer urine, and northern shaman in Scandinavia would drink the urine and would get the effect. I just wonder who it was who said, "Hey guys, I've got this idea. Let's not go there." So the magic mushroom becomes hugely important, and you can see there little sort of pixie type figures with mushroom caps, and also bearing good luck leaves, 4-leaf clover, shamrock, and lots of imagery in Northern Europe of mushrooms and pixies and elves. And we're starting to morph into something which is pretty much Father Christmas. The red cap, the white beard, and again, lots and lots of imagery of good luck, a 4-leaf clover, a horse's shoe. So, all sorts of mixed imagery, all moving in towards this sort of Christmas figure. And you've also got reindeer leaping around high on magic mushrooms, and you've got shamans, possibly now dressed like Father Christmas, doing a similar sort of thing. It starts to fit into a pattern, and the mushroom, the drug, very, very important in this. I do love the red noses on those reindeer as well. So just as we come to a close on the first part of the presentation, this celebration of the magic and mythology and the wild side of Christmas, what about the winter ivy? Again, very important to us. But it's not a Christian feature, and it's generally used to decorate the outside of buildings, not the inside of churches, because the Roman god Bacchus wore ivy. This was the god of wine and revelry, a major rival to Christianity, and actually giving a much better deal in many ways, because this wasn't a religion that said that you had to be sensible and behaving in what we would now view as a Christian way. This was a god who said, go out and drink and revel, have a good time. That's quite a strong message if you're trying to sell that to the wider populace. And ivy was his symbol. He wore it in his crown, and pagans believed that ivy was a symbol of eternal life. And so early Christians didn't use ivy to decorate the inside of churches, but they did use it as an outdoor decoration. So the end of part 1. Thank you very much, and we will continue with part 2.